Ooh, this is a little baby box. Hello everyone, welcome back to Foster the Meeple, a channel all about board games and board gamey things. I am back again today with another pumped up Kickstarter. And today's pumped up Kickstarter is going to be on Apophenia Horror Hunt from Cybergoat Studios, who very kindly sponsored today's video. Now, this game is going to be coming to Kickstarter soon, so there's a few things I want to mention. This is a prototype, so everything is subject to change, including components, rules, etc. Okay, so as per usual with my preview videos, I am going to give you a general overview of how this game works to help you determine whether or not it's a good fit for you. So it's not an official how to play. I'm not going to be covering all of the rules, but once again, just trying to give you a good idea of the game so that it can help you make a decision. So without further ado, let's dive in to the preview. All right, we are back, so let's talk about Apophenia Horror Hunt. From here on out, I will refer to it as Apophenia. Apophenia is a cooperative puzzle-style survival horror deduction game where the players must connect area cards to create a board where they can find useful items. These items include things like vanquishing tools that are used to defeat the horrors and win the game. While exploring, the horrors may suddenly strike and the players will have to defend themselves. Thus, it is necessary that the players find evidence, such as clue cards, to unveil the horror and find out what items will be helpful against that particular horror type. But what does that mean? I'm glad you asked. Let's take a closer look at how the game works. In Apophenia, players will take turns one after the other going clockwise. A player's turn will consist of 7 steps or phases, which will include start of the turn, the pickup phase where you will pick up any cards that were passed to you from another player and add them to your hand. This you'll understand a little bit more as we talk about the interact action, so just stay tuned, but know in this phase you're picking up any cards that may have been placed in front of you. Then we're going to go into the event phase where you'll draw a card from the event deck, which is this deck right here. Okay, you're going to draw it and put it into your hand. Then we'll go into the resolution phase where you'll resolve all the encounter and pass strike cards that are in your hand. Now, there are, depending on the difficulty level of the game that you are going to be playing, the player count, all of that stuff, there are going to be a certain number of encounter cards that are placed in the event deck. If you draw an encounter card, you must declare it, but don't show the card, okay? Then you must take a look at the bottom of the horror deck in secret. The horror deck is this red deck right here, and it's important to note that in order to win the game, you must defeat the horror. Not all of the horrors, just the horror, which lives at the bottom of the horror deck. So this is the deduction part of the game. There are going to be 4 horrors put into this horror deck. Only the one at the bottom is the one that you need to defeat. The rest are just decoys, but you don't know what's what until you continue playing the game, okay? So let's get back to the encounter. If you draw an encounter card, you declare it, you don't show, then you take a look at the bottom of the horror deck in secret, so don't show anybody else. You are then attacked by that horror and must defend yourself immediately before moving on to the action phase, okay? So there are two options for defense. You can either repel or survive. To repel, you're going to use an item card from your hand to repel the horror. The item must list that particular horror type in order for it to work against it. So if we were going up against that werewolf, this silver dagger would work because it works against shapeshifters, okay? We all know that werewolves cannot hold up to silver, okay? They do not go well. So you'd have to use an item card that will work against that particular type of horror. After that, the encounter is resolved and you're free to act normally. The other option is to survive, and to survive, you'll just need to discard 2 cards from your hand to escape the encounter. You must then move to a connected area and continue your turn. So we are going to be talking about how we build out the map shortly. Just so you know, you're going to move to a connected area. If that area happens to be locked or there's no area for you to go, you are killed. You dead. Rut-row Rorge. Here's something that's a little bit important and a little bit sneaky. Sometimes when surviving an encounter, players can switch sides to start acting on the horror side as a corrupted player. If this happens, do not reveal to other players that you're switching sides. You must act in the best interest of the horror against the hunters. After resolving an encounter card, you're going to shuffle it back into the event deck, all right? So it can come up again. Essentially, the gist of it is, as you continue going through event cards, it is going to be more and more likely that you reach an encounter card because the events are gone and the encounters are always shuffled back in. And now let's talk about the action phase, which is kind of obviously a big part of the game. This is where you're actually going to be doing stuff and taking actions. We're going to talk about all the actions here in a second, but just so you know, after the action phase, you will finally do the mandatory interaction check. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the action phase. So, players are free to take any of the following actions in any order, but they can only take each of the core actions once. And there's 5 core actions. Move, place an area, place a passage, open or close a passage, and obtain an item. To move, players will move their token from one area to another that is connected. So let me just set something up. So movement is done horizontally or vertically. Obviously, you can't just be running around diagonally. That would make you look very silly, okay? And you can move through the connected areas, which you'll see they're connected if they have the yellow kind of pointing areas. So if I were the yellow player, I would be able to move into the alley or into the woods because they are connected to the start. To place an area, which is another one of the core actions, you will connect an area to an area that you are currently in, so long as the 2 areas can be connected. Now, each of the area cards are going to list what they can and cannot be connected to. So let's just say that this is the situation, and let's just say that I'm in the kitchen. Now, in order for me to have put that out, what you didn't see is that I laid down a door, which we're going to talk about, and then we pretended that I unlocked it. So the kitchen is here and I am there. If I had a card in my hand that could be connected, I could play it out. Now I have the living room, and the living room can be connected to the kitchen. So you'll see the 2 arrows, we are going to connect them. I can connect the living room to the kitchen can be connected to the living room. You can also place a passage, which would be something like a window or a door. So underneath the kitchen, you will see that I had placed a door for the example and it was opened. However, you are typically going to be placing these on their closed side. Door is going to be placed on its closed or locked side unless it's otherwise written on the card. Now, you can't move on top of a door, a window, a passage, essentially, until you open them. And you do that by using a key, an attack, or by discarding 2 cards, which would then, you just kind of flip it over, it would open that door, and you would place a new location on top of it. Finally, to obtain an item, you need to be on a space that contains items. So up in the corner, you'll see as you're placing out different areas, there are going to be a certain number of items that go along with that room, essentially. So let's just put these out like so, for now, just to show you. To obtain an item, you need to be in a space that contains items. You will discard a card from your hand to get one of the area's items. You can look through all of the items unless the card states otherwise. Ooh, a silver dagger. And then you can select which one you would take, putting the rest of them face down. So those are the core actions, and you could take each of those once, so long as you are able to do them, basically. You can also take special actions, and there's no limit for these actions, and that's going to include using a card from your hand, which would be something like an inspiration or a card that allows you to attack. You can use an area ability, which you'll find written on the cards. Just notice as well, because just remember, this is just an example, but the alley actually couldn't have been placed out here because the woods were out. So just so you know, you got to pay attention to everything. And you can regain an action by discarding one card to take any of the core actions again. Finally, there is one action that you can only take once per turn, strictly once, meaning you can't use the regain an action to do it again, and that is going to be interact. So you can interact either with an area or another player in range, and being in range, by the way, means being in the same space. You can use this action to change the cards in your hand and share information with other players. To do an area interaction, you'll discard a card from your hand to draw a new card from the event deck, okay? For a player interaction, you are going to pass one card to another player in range and either draw an event card or have the other player pass you a card from their hand. Now, other players can refuse, they're not forced to trade with you, but they have no choice but to accept that pass card. When you pass a card, you are going to be passing it face down in front of them, and it will remain face down. They cannot pick it up immediately. They're going to have to wait until the start of their next turn, so they have no idea what you have passed them. It is important to note as well that you have to interact, so it will be mandatory in a few situations. First is if you don't move during your turn, or if you end your turn in an area with another player. So in this situation, if this is where purple had ended their turn, they would have to interact either with the orange player or with the location. And if it was yellow's turn and they hadn't moved, well, then they would be forced to interact. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can be killed, so I wanted to mention this again. Now, if a player is killed, they must reveal the top card of the horror deck. Only the bottom horror is relevant to the hunt. So revealing the top horrors is really helpful to the hunters so that you can rule out that what other types of horrors you're not going to be coming up against. It's going to help you plan out the items that you need and the cards that you should be keeping in your hand and all of that good stuff. After all players have seen the horror, okay, so if everybody's had a chance to look at the bottom, or after the other three horrors have been revealed, we are then going to flip the horror deck over to identify the horror. Now, the horror's effects will come into play immediately. Unveiling the horror is the most important part of the game because you need to unveil them in order to defeat them in order to win. Okay, so you'll be able to rule out horrors in various ways by using clue cards, which is a type of item card that you're able to get, or through encounters and everybody kind of looking. There are 4 different types of horrors that you can encounter. There are undead, spirits, fiends, and shapeshifters, all of which function different and have different requirements for vanquishing. And in order to vanquish the horror, hunters must find the required vanquishing tool and fulfill the criteria to use them. The game then instantly ends and the hunters win, even if there are still corrupted players in the game. Just as an example, let's just take a look at the werewolf card if this were the horror. In order to survive a werewolf, it says, unless this horror is unveiled, you become a werewolf and change sides. You must be vanquished too. Okay? They bit you, so this is a way that you can become a corrupted player. The werewolf bites you. You're a werewolf. You're bad. Here's the unveil. Strikes cannot be used against this horror. Strike is an attack card. If a player draws an encounter and is not killed or does not vanquish this horror, pass it in turn order to other hunters located up to 2 areas away. A werewolf player may move 2 areas at a time and may attack anyone by discarding 3 cards. All right? So they're all going to have a new kind of set of rules that gets introduced when they're unveiled, and they all have different ways that you need to kill them, basically. The werewolf is a sneaky hobbit because he's walking around turning everybody into werewolves and biting people, and then the werewolves are coming at you, and it's a grand old time. The last thing I wanted to mention is that you can attack other players also by backstabbing them. So you do this by secretly passing them a strike card during an interaction. So not all is honky-dory in this mostly cooperative game. That, in a very general nutshell, is Apophenia Horror Hunt, okay? So the question now is, who is this game for? This game is for fans of semi-cooperative games, exploration, monster hunting, and of course, deception. There's a chance that some of the players become corrupted and start working against you, but you may not know who is on your side unless, of course, they, if somebody gives you a strike card, they're probably not on the same side as you. A big part of this game is hand management, knowing how to best use your cards, when to give them up, when to pass them during an interaction, and cards are essentially like your main resource in this game. So hanging on to them at times is going to be the best thing to do, but you also need to use them to build out the map and so you can discover items. So that's part of the puzzle. There's also a discovery and preparation aspect to this game because you're not sure what horror you'll need to face. And so you need to prepare for a little bit of everything until you know kind of what you're up against. So getting clues to find out what you won't be fighting is key. The game itself plays pretty quickly. It's around 20 to 40 minutes, which means every decision counts. So that is a little bit about Apophenia Horror Hunt. Like I mentioned, this game is going to be on Kickstarter. All of the information, links, and everything that you need to know is going to be linked in the description below. If it sounds like something that you might be interested in, I definitely recommend, as always, that you watch some reviews, read reviews, watch videos, do your research to make sure that this game is a good fit for you. But that's everything that I have for you today. So if you're interested in buying board games like Apophenia Horror Hunt, Kickstarter, but other games that are already out on the market, you should first start by checking your friendly local gaming store. And for us, that's the Boardroom Game Cafe. And if you like what you see, please subscribe. I hope to see you again soon. And now I say goodbye and happy hunting. Goodbye. Farewell. Spooky season. Recording. Big breath. Whoops. Too much breath.